All right, we're live. Hi, I'm John Solari, your host of The Method Actor Speaks. And today we have two lovely guests together. And we're going to be talking to them. And I'm going to have them introduce themselves so we don't... Because I screw up names bad. Joyce Lynn?
Hi, I'm Joyce Lynn. Lou.
Lynn, you're very pretty, Joyce Lynn. I am Stanley Dyrector. Hey, that's my real name, spelled with a Y. So it's D-Y-R-E-C-T-O-R. Don't you ever forget about it.
Okay.
It's perfect.
Thank you, my dear.
I want to talk about... You came on the show because I asked you to come on because you have some books and plays.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
we really need to... You want to hold up the book? And
Oh, sure. I certainly appreciate the plug for my book
there it is. That's it.
called Shedding Light on the Hollywood Blacklist, Conversations with Participants, with a foreword by Ed Asner.
Oh, really?
That's right. He was very gracious to read my book and to write something up about it. And also, I'd like to tell you that this book is available in various areas. Actually, if you go on Amazon, you can purchase the book.
Okay.
It's also an ebook, a Kindle, and it's also on Barnes & Noble.
What made you write it?
What made me write it? Well, years ago, I was very active in doing my show, Senior Prom. That was the original title of my show's name. Then I changed it to my name, the Stanley Dyrector Show. Now, this is a story. When I did Senior Prom a number of years ago on cable television, actors and writers would say, well, what is this, about high school, senior prom? Or they would say, hey, is this about old people? Because, you know, there's a lot of gray listing of actors and writers in show business, in Hollywood, and I really don't want to be on a show called Senior Prom. So after doing about 10 shows, I decided to change the name of my cable TV show to the Stanley Dyrector Show. Now, I must tell you, I really didn't want to do it that way, but friends convinced me to use my real name, my legitimate name, because of the fact that, what was I going to call it? I wasn't going to call it The Method Actor Speaks. So I kind of had no other choice but to use my name.
But you were a method actor. You played an Indian and
Oh.
in other parts, right?
You know, thank you for the recognition, Mr. John Solari. I played Indians a number of times. Actually, they would kind of put the headdress upon me and they would kind of darken me up, and I played opposite Shirley Knight and people like that. And my dialogue was very, very profound in those days of Buckskin and Sugarfoot, but particularly Buckskin. I remember one line which strikes me just so dynamically, and that line was, "Him got papoose, white man no good to Indian." So, you know, I used a Chekhovian kind of gimmick because I thought of myself as a tree when I said the line. So it worked for me. And I got work because of being an Indian. So I was cast in many other parts, and obviously I am not a Native American. And in those days of, well, 4-star television, review television, which is, by the way, now called CBS Television Center.
Yeah.
You know, I have a habit of drooling these days. You know, I don't know what the hell it is.
I'd be drooling too if
You
I
know-
was sitting there next
You know,
to
well, actually, I'm
Joycelyn.
sitting next to this lovely lady. I don't know why I'm talking about it, but you know, also I got a haircut for this show.
Oh.
I really
Nice.
so yeah, but you know, I'm not too sure about it because I don't know if it works. You know what
It
I mean?
works.
Because I'm really more of a laid-back guy, and I'm kind of still living in the 1960s. Do you know what I mean? When we used to go to love-ins and things like that.
I
And-
could see you with the long hair.
Oh yeah, I was Tom Jones when my hair was curled, and Herb Alpert. Yeah, and then I became Tony Musante. You know, so I was in
Sure.
good company.
Tony Musante, yes.
Yeah, Tony was a great Tony Musante who did such great method work.
Yeah.
I might add. And I was fortunate enough to study as an actor, as a young actor, with Al Ruscio, Eric Morris.
I did a movie with Al Russo.
Al Ruscio is a wonderful guy. What a great teacher. He directed me in Home of the Brave, which I did. I played the part of Coney, which later on became a movie. Actually, it became a movie, I think, in the mid-50s, and it was produced by Stanley Kramer, and it was just a fabulous movie with a African-American actor by the
remember.
name of James Edwards, who should have won an Academy Award for that part.
He was great in it.
He was great. I mean, it was just with, golly, it had a terrific cast. Lloyd Bridges was in the cast, but the main guy who later on I was fortunate enough to interview and who was in my book, Shedding Light on the Hollywood Blacklist, Conversations with Participants, Jeff Corey played the psychiatrist in that movie, and Jeff was fantastic, and Jeff will always be in my heart.
Jeff, I did a movie with him, The Messenger of Death, with Charles Bronson. And one of the biggest things that came was Jeff Corey at the party. I was pretty far away from him, and hey, you did good work. And coming from Jeff Corey,
That's great.
you know, he was.
Did you know Jeff?
I didn't know him, but I know of him because, of course, I read a lot of books and things like that.
Right. I heard before Joyce Lynn was talking about costume designers. Yeah. I have to tell you, when I first came out to Hollywood, obviously I was a sailor. I came to Hollywood on Liberty. I was stationed in San Diego, and as a kid, I always wanted to be a movie star, okay? Prior to that, I wanted to be the middleweight champion of the world. So I boxed, and the reason I boxed was because it gave you a reputation in the neighborhood. In other words, hey, don't mess with him. Canvasback is bad. And that was my nickname, Canvasback, you know? So, and there was good cause to call
Because you
me
got knocked down, or you knew
yeah,
that?
I got knocked down a lot, you know? But what was so interesting to me was that as a kid, I would box at the Police Athletic League.
PAL,
and,
yeah.
At PAL, right? And sometimes I got in with some bad guys, and I would box these bad guys, and then my greatest accomplishment before I fought in the New York City Golden Gloves at Ridgewood Grove, the night that Floyd Patterson's brother fought at Ridgewood Grove. By the way, I
Was
fought
that Sherman? Because I boxed one of his brothers. I'm trying to. When I was in reform school.
Oh, really? Gee, that's funny. I never met you there. Actually, no, I never went to reform school.
He was up in Warwick, New York.
Warwick. I remember Warwick Reform School.
I boxed one of his brothers. I think his name was Sherman, and I beat him.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't box him, but Floyd was the champ at that time, and as I say, I fought a guy named Valentino. Is that an omen or what? at Ridgewood Grove. Now, I had the Police Athletic League behind me, and I was in my sharp PAL outfit and all that, and I'd been boxing for a number of years, and so I fought this guy, and I figured boxing, you know, I always thought of boxing as like outsmarting the other guy because I really didn't want to hurt anybody, okay? But he came out and he was looking to kick the crap out of me, so I started to box. Actually, in the second round, I started to box. You know, the first round, I was avoiding his punches. And the consequences were good in a way because I lost. Now, the New York Daily News said I lost by a hairline decision because I really did fight. But then after the fight was over, there were people that, well, they used to hang out at the pool room and who encouraged me to be a prize fighter. And they said, I think, Stan, that maybe you ought to go into a different field because you didn't move right. I had a nice punch, but I didn't have the movement.
Yeah.
And in the gym, the gymnasium I fought at, as I say, the 73rd Precinct PAL, we had 3 champs that year. And I was the only guy at Ridgewood Grove from our unit to lose. So that was, but my father did give me the keys to the car, and I drove off, and I was underage driving too, by the way. So I was really a case. And I had to get out of Brooklyn, because Brooklyn was really tough. Brownsville was the toughest. I used to go with a girl named Concetta Pizzicello. She had 3 brothers, and you couldn't really get too close to her because you thought of her 3 brothers, you know? There was Gonzo, Patsy, and another brother. And she had a couple of sisters, and she lived on top of a fruit store in Brownsville, I think it was on East New York Avenue. And her mother, like out of an Italian movie, would say, Concetta, Concetta, and she would yell, and I would, like, you know, split the scene, and that was growing up as a kid in Brownsville. You really had to kind of watch your tail, because that was the whole idea about being a boxer, because if you didn't have a reputation, everybody was going to kick your butt, and they were going to ask you for money. Because I went to junior high school, PS 178, and I discovered later on that Anne Bancroft's father went to that junior high school.
She was Italian.
Anne Italiana was a real name.
Right.
And her father, because one day I happened to be talking with her father, and he said he went to, you know, PS 178. So you know, it was kind of a kick. And so, as I say, I joined the Navy to get out of Brownsville, because it was rough. I mean, it was really rough. I was in with some bad company, and also I went to Brooklyn Automotive High School. And at Brooklyn Automotive, at that particular time, the main thing amongst my friends were how to hotwire cars. So grand larceny was what you were set up for to go to school. So I decided, nix, I got to get out, and that's what I did. I eventually got out of Brooklyn by joining the Navy and seeing the world, and coming to Hollywood on my Liberty in my dress white uniform, and looking like an awestruck kid from Iowa or Idaho or Nebraska or anywhere like that, because I want to be in the movies.
And what year was that?
John.
No, I mean around.
Hey,
No, because
look.
I'm thinking about when you're talking about the Blacklist.
Oh, well, the Blacklist came, you know, that was about that era.
That's what I'm saying. I'm
but
kinda
I didn't
thinking.
know. But I didn't know about the Blacklist.
I know
John.
that. Oh, that's what I'm saying when I ask you what year it was, because you come to Hollywood doing, and here you are writing a book about the Blacklist.
That is ironic. You know, really, John. No, ask me more about that. Because
Really, and I want you to tell us about it.
well, the Blacklist came about from being a member of the Writers Guild of America West. First, I was SAG. I paid $200, and that was the membership.
Like 3,000.
And I was in a movie called Drag Strip Riot. I mean, it was really like Lady Luck kind of touched me. And I did what you'd say, comedy things. I did impersonations, you know.
Oh, like Joycelyn.
Just to build the dream on, and my imagination. You know, I did all
Louis
that.
Armstrong.
I did Mr. B. I did Billy Daniels. I did, you know, a whole bunch of stuff, you know. So in the movie, actually, I did Come With Me to the Casbah. If you see it, kind of, by the way, you can see it for nothing on YouTube. I was known as Marcus Dyrector at that particular time. Then later on in my career, I became Mark Douglas. And then one day I said, what the hell am I being everybody else but me?
You are.
So I went back to Stanley Dyrector, just like when I became a writer. I was Stanley Dyrector, and I wrote Wagon Train. Now you're going to say, wait a minute, how did this guy from Brooklyn wind up writing Wagon Train? I don't want to talk about it now. That'll be another time.
Okay.
So, about my book, Shedding Light, can I grab it? and
Sure,
show it?
sure.
Oh, yeah, because I'm very proud of this book. Because I interviewed some very, very marvelous people. Present company, you're a beautiful lady, and I saw your interview with my friend Mr. Solari, and I thought it was a very eclectic interview. But now, getting back to my book, this is actually a majority of transcripts of some of the fabulous people who were blacklisted in Hollywood community during the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, Robert Lees.
You could put it down.
I called him Bob Lees. His friends called him Bob. And he used to write Abbott and Costello movies with his partner Fred Rinaldi. Now, you know, the House Un-American Activities Committee, which is where he went to testify, they were sending people to prison. He was the second group. I want people who are students of history or people who are interested in movie history to know that there was a first group. In that first group was Dalton Trumbo and 9 others who, off the top of my head, I can't think of.
But they're in the book.
But they're in my book, right. And I must tell you that they went to prison, these people, the first 10, the Hollywood 10. And Hollywood came out, and some of the people like Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall and Marcia Hunt and various movie stars, they came to kind of say, hey, this is wrong to send people to prison for what their beliefs are. Now, let me tell you a little bit about history. At one time, in the United States of America, the Communist Party was on the ballot. That's right.
Right.
Democrats, Republicans, Liberals, Socialist Party, Communist Party. So, what it all means to me? It means that there was freedom of speech, but that speech was taken away. And that's a whole political spectrum which I'm not going to go into now because actually I'm not a scholar.
No.
And so, but my book is about others that were implicated, that were called communists, and some became very successful. Like Abraham Polanski was actually also called before the House Un-American Activities Committee in 1947 or so. Or maybe it was a little later. I'm trying to, because Sterling Hayden blew the whistle on Abe Polanski and on Robert Lees by saying that they were, he couldn't think of their names at first when he was testifying before the committee. And then suddenly he said, oh, yeah. Robert Lees and Abraham Polanski, they were part of the clique of communists. So that actually kind of screwed my 2 guests who were on my show. But here's the thing. Abraham Polanski, who wrote and was nominated for an Oscar for Body and Soul with John Garfield, also did a number of other movies. And he also wrote under a pseudonym, as did Bob Lees. So they were able to get employment, but they were stigmatized in Hollywood. And so
They could do theater though in this.
they could do well. Actually,
Because Ron, weren't they with? Wasn't he with the group theater?
Actually, I don't think Abraham Polanski was. No.
Oh, okay.
Abraham Polanski started his career through a lady called Molly Goldberg, who had a radio show.
Didn't you have the Goldbergs?
The Goldbergs, yeah. What do you know about the Goldbergs?
I saw it at the TV museum.
Right.
It was fabulous, and they use that now. There's another series. It's because of that. Do you know about that?
No, actually I don't. Tell me.
There's a current series on now called The Goldbergs, and they got that idea from Molly's show.
Oh.
No, that I didn't know. But I now that you mention it, I do see on billboards the Goldbergs. Well, Molly Goldberg was very successful in radio, and Abraham Polanski had worked for a law firm, and Molly Goldberg had some kind of lawsuit going or whatever, and Abe Polanski was doing this kind of dress manufacturing law, whatever, and Molly they got together, and before he knew it, he wrote something, and she loved it, and he was writing her radio show and making more as a writer for Molly Goldberg than he was as a lawyer in this law firm. Oh, my, how times have changed, brothers and sisters, right? But
How did you feel as an actor? Now, I'm trying. Oh God, I went blank. So let's go on.
well, look, I didn't
From
go
Actors Studio. I'm talking.
Actors Studio?
No, he
What?
directed.
Yeah. Tell him Willie Boy was here, Abe Polonsky. That's got him out of the blacklist. But he also wrote
with Robert Blake.
Yeah, with Bobby Blake, right, Robert Blake. But he also wrote a movie called Golden Earrings, Abe Polonsky, many years ago with Marlene Dietrich. And he was on the set with Marlene Dietrich. So, he wanted a kiss from Marlene Dietrich. Who wouldn't? And so she gave him like a peck on the cheek or something. He said, no, I want a real Marlene Dietrich kiss. And then she really cuddled him and grabbed him and gave him the kiss of his life. And he got his Marlene Dietrich kiss, So he always talked about a movie that they rewrote. Golden Earrings had nothing that he had written.
The one I was thinking of was Kazan. What did you feel about Kazan? Because a lot of actors really, I remember Rod Steiger was really up against him for talking.
Right.
But then someone brought up a great point. If you disliked him so much, why did you work for him on the waterfront?
Well, on the waterfront, yeah, that's...
It was why do you say publicly, I hate this man, this and that, and yet you're willing to work for him?
Well, that's a good point, because On the Waterfront was written by Bud Schulberg, who purportedly kind of had some doing with the naming of names. Victor Navasky wrote a book called Naming Names, so I would suggest anybody interested in furthering their knowledge about the Hollywood Blacklist read Navasky's book. But I will say this, that Kazan was greatly disliked by Abraham Polonsky. By the way, Abraham Polonsky's middle name was Lincoln. That's true. His name was Abraham Lincoln Polonsky. And I asked him, why did your father name you Abraham Lincoln Polonsky? And he said, because he was like crazy, to name me that. But his father said, you will appreciate it one day. And I think it was left at that.
I think he did, one day.
Yeah, but he, Robert Lees, by the way, did forgive Sterling Hayden, because Sterling Hayden wrote a book called The Wanderer, where he said that he was, I'm making up the words now, but it was something like, what a schmuck I was to name my friends as communists before this committee. I always regretted it after. And so Bob Lees basically, said, well, hey, this is a guy who, what we used to say on the street, who dummied up,
He stood up.
He stood up and said he blew it. Now, Mr. Polonsky and Norma Bosman, who is still around, by the way, 95 years young, who's still writing books.
He's got to be one of the last left, then.
Oh, well, Marsha Hunt is...
Yeah, she's still around, right, yeah.
Yeah, a wonderful lady who was in my book, by the way. Marsha Hunt, I did an interview last year. She was the last interview I did. And Marsha Hunt talked about John Henry Faulks. I can't spell the name, but John Henry Faulks, I want you historians to know, was able to sue a slanderous committee for calling him a communist, un-American, and everything like that. And John Henry Faulks won his lawsuit and won about $2.5 million in the lawsuit. I don't know if he lived to spend it, but he won the lawsuit. And it took him years of trying, but he won. So there's a lot to be said. A lot of names were called in those days, and there were a lot of people that blew the whistle on their friends. And so this is all should be related to your own conscience. If your conscience bothers you about it, about, blowing the whistle on your friends, I mean, that's what life is. Life is choices, and we all have to learn how to live and to live as best we can and to get to our own inner being and try to be in harmony with everything around us, because as John Solari's work shows, the method actor speaks, it is like there is, they say there's method in madness or something like that.
There's a method to your madness.
There's method to your madness. And there is
Yes.
a kind of madness if you take the independent road of being you. But to get to you is a journey. And I believe that is the journey of living in life. I'd like to ask Joyce Lynn if she agrees.
Definitely.
Yeah,
I think it's great that you are doing that. You did that book because, you know, people forget all the sacrifices that people had to endure.
For free speech.
Yeah.
To have free speech and to express their ideas, because, you know, there's a lot of propaganda that said that some of these blacklisted screenwriters had to write what the party told them to write, and that is not true. They wrote screenplays and they were denied their living because they happen to have their own sense of politics, and many of them, by the way, and this is not a cop-out, they were kind of pissed off that Stalin committed all those atrocities. They were pissed off enough to, like, blow away from the party. They said, hey, man, this is crazy. This guy was a madman, too. And so there were a lot of innocence involved. There was a lot of naivete.
Yeah.
And my dear friend Robert Lees, who, as I said, used to write Abbott and Costello movies, he was like an angel on earth. He was, unfortunately, murdered in Hollywood, and that's part of, well,
Part of life.
part of life. And he was an angel that just gave and was of good nature and had a loving trust of people. So that should be a warning to my fellow colleagues out there. Always watch yourself. Always beware. Like the true New Yorker that I am and that Mr. Solari is, but perhaps I go a step further. I do look over my shoulder.
Well, I always believe instinct. You know, your instincts are usually right. My instincts are usually right. I did 16 years in prison, so I know what he's talking about, and my instincts are, I know people very well. I read you very quickly. It's probably why I'm alive today. But
That's very interesting.
Stanley, we're running out of time because I want to do part 2 about the plays you wrote, and because I really would like to get her into talking about some of your works on your theater, and I appreciate this. So we're going to come back with part 2 with our guest, and we're going to start right up in a minute. And I want to thank you for all that you've been here, and it's really fascinating listening to you. But we'll just end it here and come back with part 2.
Did you buy my book, though?